Guys, something massive just happened. Paradox actually took me and I think a lot of other people by surprise by releasing a special development diary for EU5 or Project Caesar, as we're all going to be calling it after it actually gets announced as EU5. Now, in this special dev diary, we see officially the entirety of the world, the political map, the cultural map, the religious map, every single map layer of the entirety of the world is in this dev diary, updated with the most recent version. So forget about what you thought in the previous dev diaries what it looked like, because there have been some massive changes. I'm gonna leave the dev diary in the comment section, of course, if you want to take a closer look to it. We're gonna glance through this, and they also make another announcement, very important, because it kind of hints at the fact that the game is gonna be released within 2025. So keep a close eye to what I have to say. This is gonna be a shorter video, so let me know what you think about EU5, when you think it's gonna come out. I'm actually curious your opinions too. Now, this is entitled the Special Map Edition, of course, from the 6th of January. We have, of course, the countries map mode starting off here, and we see some actual changes. You can actually zoom in a little bit more, and we see some changes within the HRE, actually some color changes. Naples has a much cooler color confirmed now. There's some changes in North Africa, the Middle East, even in India I've seen some changes. And most importantly, if you look at the map itself, it's very clear that EU5 at the start of the campaign has a lot less nations than EU4 has at the start, or at least it kind of feels like that, seeing as most of the world is not yet owned by any sort of nation, since we have the idea of Society of Pops, which is peoples that are not technically recognized as nations but still exist in these parts of the world, of course. Now, that being said, we do have building based countries. What does that mean? It means nations like banks, nations like the daimyos, because in EU5 daimyos are buildings that own certain areas. It's a little bit more complicated, and until we find out more, we don't really know exactly how it works. But you can see over here, if we scroll over, you see the daimyos are portrayed as building based countries. We of course also have a lot of Hanseatic League building based countries, all of the red dots within the northern parts of Europe, as well as some blue dots within Italy and south of France are also building based countries. We have a few more in the Iberian Peninsula which are new. We don't know too much about them, but we can suppose what they might actually be. Then we also have the Society Pops that I mentioned earlier, which is essentially population groups which are not developed enough or don't have the advancement, which is the technology high enough to become an actual country. We have a lot of these in the Indo-Chinese Peninsula as well as in the Siberian parts. The Ainu people also are denoted as a Society of Pops, not an actual country. We have the Sapmi people and the Finnish people in the northern parts of Europe. Most of what we know of as tribes within EU4 are now Society Pops in North America, as well as north of the Mexican area where we have the Aztec, various Aztec and Mayan civilizations. A lot of Society Pops in South America, a lot of them in Africa, none in Australia, which is a little bit weird. I thought we had some Society Pops in Australia, but I guess we decided to go full on 1920s Australian government, am I right? We do have some in New Zealand, however, so there's that. The Dynasty map mode, of course, pretty self-explanatory. You're not going to go through this too much. I think we all know it's all Borgian at this point, isn't it? Well, most of the world is Borgian now, or Anjou for that matter. Now, here's a really interesting one, right? This is the first time we see the type of government map mode for the whole planet. We have republics, which are Novgorod. Most of North Italy is republics, quite a few republics within the HRE itself, and then we have theocracies. These are the light blue ones within the HRE, as well as monarchies, which is the predominant type of government, and steppe horde is a separate government. Take note, the Yuan dynasty is shown as a monarchy type of government rather than a steppe horde, of course, whilst their cousins and technically subjects in the golden horde are still steppe hordes, as well as the Chagatai hordes are hordes as well. Now we also have another type of government that's not really easy to see. Is the tribe. You see over here in Madagascar we have tribes. We have in Africa, we have in Arabia, in the Nubian lands, even in Ireland we have tribes for that matter, and around the northern parts of the Korean Peninsula, and even in Tibet. Tibet actually is pretty interesting because it has a mixture of steppe hordes to the north, theocracies, tribes, and monarchies. Tibet has everything apparently. Another really interesting map, the court language map, because there's multiple layers of language, of course. We have Kipchak Cossack is the main court language in the Golden Horde, Mandarin or Chinese in Yuan, of course, Arabic all around the Middle East, Oghuz in the various Beyliks of Anatolia, Greek in the Byzantine lands. French is the court language not only in France though, but also in England, which technically at this point of the campaign still speaks French as the court language. So the monarchy of the English spoke fluent French, most likely spoke French amongst each other rather than what we know as English. Fun fact about this, Richard the Lionheart, the great crusader, spent most of his life in France, only spent around 10 months of his life in England. He only went to England when he had to tax people, which is funny because his brother John Lackland, the bad guy from the Robin Hood story, is the one that is seen as the bad guy, but Richard was actually the bad guy if you really think about it, since Richard was using England as a tax source, didn't care about the local populace, whilst John Lackland did care about the local populace and hated having to collect those taxes for his brother because he did technically get seen as the horrible worst ruler of the English, right? Anyway, he also didn't speak much English. He only spoke a few words of English to Richard Lionheart. Why am I talking about Richard Lionheart? Fun fact also, we got Latin in the Baltic, Latin in Hungary, Latin in the Teutonic lands, and even Latin in Poland, because these are hardcore Catholic areas, as you would imagine. This is the locations map mode. Again, I'll leave the dev diary in the comment section if you in the description if you want to see it. I think there are some stats at the end of this dev diary we're going to go through. These are the provinces, the areas, the terrain, and you can actually see this is really accurate compared to modern terrain types, right? With some variations. I would imagine for some areas maybe they had some climate change in the meanwhile because of various reasons. We do have continental in most of Europe, oceanic towards the west, Arctic in most of Russia, cold arid in most of Central Asia, arid in Africa, in the northern parts of Africa and Arabia, as well as in the south, and we have tropical in the middle, as well as tropical in South America mostly, and in the Mexican bits, tropical all over the Southeast Asian parts as well. Pretty curious to see how exactly the terrain is going to help us win our battles in EU5 when it comes out. These are the mountains, the various flatlands, of course. Lots of mountains in the Tibetan plateau, and surprisingly a lot of mountains in the far east part of Russia. I didn't expect to see that many mountains there, whilst only hills in the Ural mountains that technically should be mountains, right? Am I wrong? Pavia also mentions that Johan will talk about the effects of each terrain type on Wednesday, when we're going to get the first sneak peek at a brand new series of development diaries called Tinto Flavor, and they're going to go through the specific flavor that every country is going to be receiving, or maybe not every country, maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing it's going to be specific flavor for specific areas of the world, I assume. Who knows, right? Let's see. Now, development map mode again has seen quite a few changes from the initial development map mode that they released a few months ago, and still the most developed area is China as well as North India, whilst in Europe we seriously need some more development in some areas, in my opinion. I would say give a bit more development to the English lands even, but then again, I kind of like to see the English a little bit less developed when you think about it, to make it a bit of a challenge to increase your development, to overshadow the French realms, right? Italy, of course, is the most developed lands in Europe, with the southern parts of the Iberian Peninsula also having pretty high development, Flanders also having super high development as well, a little bit of medium-sized development in Constantinople area, and of course it's all downhill when you start going into the east, especially the Hordelands. Moldova got a massive nerf. It went from like an average of 10 development to flat out 3 and 4 development everywhere. Not sure why, but it makes me sad. It makes me very sad. We also have some pretty high development in the Levant area, as well as the Nile Delta, basically the Egyptian bits, and we have some pockets of higher development around the Central African areas in the Mali Empire, where we have Mansa Musa in the start date technically, and into the east of the Mali Empire around the Bornu empires, or at this point it's not really Bornu, is it? No, it is Bornu. We have some development there too. In central Mexico, we've got one really green province, which I assume would be Tenochtitlan, who's to say, and a few more yellowish development, which is like I guess 8-9 development, who's to say, right? The natural harbors have also had a bit of an update. Surprised to see that they care about this so much that they gave an overview of the changes for Europe. There's a lot of good natural harbors in Europe, as there should be, of course. Now, the cultural map mode we see right now, again, again has had quite a few changes, especially in Asia, a lot of changes. In the Anatolian Peninsula, also quite a few changes from what I can tell. Even in the Balkans, I'm seeing a lot of changes around Wallachia, Transylvania, Bulgaria. Oh, interesting. So I'm guessing a lot has happened in the past couple of weeks or past month that influenced these changes. I like to see the transition between culture areas where you have a bit of a hash at the border between these cultures, because technically it was never properly defined borders in time before modern times, right? It was always like where, say, the Nogai and the Astrakani met, there was some villages which were Astrakani, some villages that were Nogai, living right next to one another, and at times being either a part of Nogai, either a part of Astrakhan, depending on what kind of political quote-unquote changes you see on the map for that particular period of time. This is the language map mode, which is significantly more centralized compared to the cultural map mode, because there's multiple layers to EU5. Culture doesn't necessarily equal only language as we know by now. We have Bantu in most of Africa, we have Zhe in most of South America, we've got German in Europe, Ruthenian, Romanian, Slavs of different backgrounds. Lehitic apparently is the main Polish language. Is that what they call Polish in Polish? Lehitic? I did not know that. French, Occitan, Spanish, Italian, Greek, Oghuz, and so on. Now, this is the languages of the people. Keep that in mind. It's not the language of the church. It's not the language of the court. These are different, which we've shown earlier. The religious map mode also seen some massive changes. Remember that the animists have been split now. So we do have the big ones. We have the Catholics, we have the Orthodox, we have the Sunnis, the Shamanists, the Confucians, the various Hindus and Buddhists, Shintos, etc. But then all the animists have been split, and I'm talking massively split. All over the world, we probably have about 300 religions, including all the small religions that are basically a few hundred, maybe a few thousand, let's say, animists, if they keep it like that. So makes you wonder, how good is the performance going to be when you see something like this? I think it's going to be really good, because in my opinion, they're using the same principles that they used for Victoria 2 when it comes to the distribution of pops, the way that you represent pops, religions, cultures, etc. So considering Vicky 2 doesn't require a NASA computer, I'm very confident that EU5 is not going to require a NASA computer too. The raw material map mode, it's a lot of lumber around the planet apparently, and wheat. So I assume those are going to be the main problems in most countries, having food, which is various types of wheat and rice and etc., and having lumber to build stuff and stone. Now the markets is where it gets really interesting, because the more developed a market, the shinier it gets. And I love to see this, because this is also, I'm assuming, the in-game map, right? Probably not. No, it's not the in-game map. This is the one that you get from the game files for sure. I'm wrong. It's the game files one for sure, because you're not going to see it like this in game with the provinces highlighted like that. This is 100% the game file. Now we have some statistics here. The total population is 421 million worldwide, which is huge. ChatGPT says that it was around 360 to 430 million, so they went with the higher estimation apparently. ChatGPT also says the world population went from 475 million to 350 or 375, so 100 million died. So we can expect that around 100 million or 25% of the world population is going to perish after the first few years of the campaign. We have the distribution here. Asia's got the highest amount, 262 million, 99 million in Europe, 20 million in America, 37 in Africa, and 1 million in Oceania. This makes you wonder, doesn't it? 421 million in 1337 worldwide. In today's 8 billion. That's such a freaking massive difference. It's crazy. Like 99 million, all of Europe is less than, I don't know, modern Pakistan has more than that, right? They also want to give a shout out to you guys, and I also want to give the same shout out to you guys for giving all those opinions and that feedback with backing of sources, of course, on the forums. It really has helped out the team a lot, and they really appreciate it. And I love to see that they give this shout out to the community, because it shows that the development team actually cares about the opinion of the community and loves to see the community get involved. Also mentions Friday 10th, we're going to see Tinto Flavor, as I was saying earlier, which will show and talk about content that we have been creating for Project Caesar. This also gives me the idea that Project Caesar, aka EU5, is going to get announced this year and likely either come out this year or next year, early next year, since they're so close to basically finishing it, right? I mean, we've got pretty much everything done already when it comes to the map itself, to the layers, etc. Now we just see the actual flavor. And this is the question, right? This is, I kind of assume this is how they're going to be testing to see how much the community wants flavor and content wise from the game before they release it. If the community is okay with the amount of flavor that the game has, so let me put it like this, they're going to release say 10 dev diaries from Tinto flavor. If the community has a positive outlook on these 10 Tinto flavor dev diaries, what's going to happen is they're going to release the game this year or early next year, because they're going to be like, okay, the community is fine with what we are offering right now. Now, if the community gives bad feedback and thinks that there's not enough content, not enough flavor, then they're likely going to continue developing it and releasing the game a little bit later, maybe a year later. My opinion, 100%, this is not backed by Paradox, nothing, it's 100% speculation, but considering I've been freaking right about most stuff when it comes to EU5 or Project Caesar, I'd say it's probably a good idea to give them some honest feedback when you see the Tinto flavor. Go to the forums and let them know what your opinion is. That's it for me. Hope you enjoyed this. Love you, and I'll see you in the next one.